Patriots dealt with a bunch of bad weather in the lead up to the playoffs and the Super Bowl. That's the Ferry Building behind us as we welcome you to the show. Marcus Spears, Mina Kimes, Ryan Clark, Dan Orlovsky. We're basking in the glow. Hello, everybody. Listen, we kind of have a sprinkling of a crowd here.
Oh my goodness, it's beautiful here.
Gorgeous background. That's the Bay Bridge.
Gorgeous
anyway, we'll keep showing you. We'll keep showing you all of the beautiful shots of San Francisco, but a lot to get to as Sal Paolantonio is going to join us right now. He's covering the Patriots and over there at the team hotel. Sal, what is the latest from the Patriots team today?
Well, you can't see him, Laura, and we can't show him for security reasons, but 5 big, beautiful touring buses just rolled into the team hotel here in Santa Clara for the New England Patriots to take them momentarily to Palo Alto, to Stanford University for the Wednesday practice of game week, which is always the big one. Mike Vrabel said the next 48 hours are critical, and they will go through every situation, first down, second down, and, of course, red zone. And on third down is very important, a critical down in Super Bowls, especially with the Patriots and the Seahawks. Get this number. 3 of the last 4 Patriots-Seahawks matchups have ended on the 1-yard line. You got to be ready for everything with these two football teams when they go against each other, especially Drake May as a runner. He had 63 scrambles this season. During the regular season, and during the postseason, he had 9 for 125 yards. I'm not good at math, but that's 13 yards a carry. Here's Josh McDaniels talking about it.
He's going to have to, pick his spots. He hasn't forced it all year, and that's been an important part of him making plays with his legs. When he makes those decisions to go and make plays with his legs, it just adds a different element that the defense has to defend. So, there's probably going to be a few opportunities for that to happen on Sunday, and I hope he picks the right times to do it.
Yeah, you got to account for Drake May as a runner. Denver did not do that. Their spy operation didn't work. Seattle's been very good at it all season long. So as Josh McDaniels said, Drake May is going to have to pick his spots as a runner in Super Bowl 60, Laura.
I love it, Sal, and I'm glad you brought up Drake May's legs because we're going to spend some time on that here. Of course, checking in with Sal Paolantonio all week long as he covers the Patriots. Drake May ran for 65 yards in the AFC Championship, his second game with at least 65 rush yards this postseason. After averaging 26.5 rush yards a game during the regular season, May is averaging 47 this postseason at nearly 6 yards a carry. The Super Bowl record for rush yards by a quarterback is 64 by Steve McNair in Super Bowl 34, so I wonder how Drake May will factor into history there. Dan, when you've seen May's run game, why do you think it could have an impact on Sunday specifically?
Because it happens at less traditional times than maybe we're accustomed to. I think that when Drake decides to run is going to be a big deal. A lot of times we've talked about it in the playoffs, and it's like third down. When Drake runs a lot on first, and really second down. So those second down situations, not having to avoid the third and long when the pass rush. So number one, when he decides to do it. And then I think when Josh McDaniels decides to do it, we've seen them utilize designed quarterback runs down in the red zone more than they did in the regular season. There you see it second down. He's taken off a lot and almost been as effective as he's been on third down. And so I wanted to talk to Marcus and Ryan about it. It's like when you guys as a defense are dealing with a quarterback that wants to be a little bit more aggressive on early downs, does that change rush? Does that change style?
Well, I think the first thing it changes play calls.
Yeah.
Right? If you are a coach, a defensive coordinator, you want to have eyes on the quarterback. So it's going to keep you out of man. It's going to keep you out of some of those pressures because you want your underneath coverage to be able to see Drake May. And then on the other side of that, it's not just Drake May using his legs to make big plays and gain first downs by running the football with scrambles. It's also the subtle movement that creates second play opportunities. And so sometimes when you are in those zones, you don't have the opportunity to plaster onto those guys, and they can create separation, which has created some big plays for the New England Patriots.
And then the fear up front is it's like a rock and a hard place. You don't want to take away your aggressiveness going after the quarterback, but you always want to be conscious about where you are in space. And a lot of times with Drake May, the way he escapes is up and through the center of the pocket because he's physical and powerful. So not only do you have to worry about containing him in your rush, you got to get him on the ground.
Is that everybody, though? One guy?
It's all hands on deck, right? This would be similar to Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. Like that's the type of athlete that I think he is. Now, when it comes to his ability to also hit the deep shot, you can't be in between what is he going to do in this situation. It has to be that ability to be 100 miles an hour on your rush and everybody retracing and almost like feeling where your guys are as opposed to where he is, because he's dangerous if he gets going. And then when he gets out, later in the game, it slows you. And now he's sitting back there with an opportunity to push the ball down the field.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you focused on his ability to step up and run between the tackles. Since he came into the NFL, running between the tackles, 68% first down rate, which is the best of any quarterback in football. What I think is so interesting about this matchup is, so in preparation for this game, I thought, let me see how Seattle's handled mobile quarterbacks this year.
They haven't faced it.
They have only faced seven design quarterback runs on the season.
Wow.
And none of them went for first downs. Went back and watched the game against Jaden Daniels because I thought, is probably the most indicative. They didn't spy him. No, they didn't play man coverage. They don't play a lot of man generally, and certainly didn't in that game. But I was shocked by how little regard the linebackers had for him as a runner in that game.
I don't think they would spy Drake May.
I don't think so either.
Yeah, I don't think
if
it's
you're not going to spy
Jaden
Daniels, you wouldn't spy Drake May, right?
And I think it would just compromise their coverage structure.
A part of it too is the athleticism of the backers. Like Emma
Trusting
is one of those guys. He can trace. Ernest Jones can trace. And then, too, remember, the other thing that makes Seattle really dangerous on defense is their big guys can run. From the interior.
Leonard, Byron.
All of those guys. So pursuit for them, they are okay with giving up 5 yards because they feel like we're not going to give up the big.
Your point about the backers and the DBs, though, and how good they are at tackling and tracing, I think trace is what Danan said. If it's third and long, I think Nick Emenwari can chase down Drake May.
Right.
But on first down, it's a little bit harder of a task, which is why I agree with you. I would run him more on early downs.
Yes.
Well, it's going to be whether or not these plays are design calls for Drake May, because I do believe some of the off-schedule things, some of the things that just happen instinctively are more difficult for a defense. When you have called quarterback runs, there's also tells in the way that you block these things. And a team like Seattle that is so locked in on alignment, assignment, and key, they can get to the football. But Drake May, with the improv skills and his ability to step up into the pocket, I believe make it even more difficult. And it's going to be like what Marcus says. If they can hit a couple of deep shots to loosen this team up, in my opinion, especially across the middle of the football field, it changes the way this defense reacts to Drake May.
I just think it'll be very interesting to watch Drake early on those early downs, first and second down, because you want to live in the world of, yes, if you see the seam go, but also not just bailing, and taking away chunk throws down the field. And then does Josh design certain runs or maybe even things on the perimeter to allow the legs to be a little bit more of a threat early to even up the numbers game?
It's got to think. You feel like in that first series of scripted plays, design quarterback run should be in there early. Maybe get him a little bit more
put the fear in them.
Yeah, exactly. Top stories to get to, Adam, as we get you caught up on some of the latest news. A lot's been happening, right? There's some news on the offensive coordinator front. Let's start with the Cardinals. What did they do in Arizona?
They're hiring Nathaniel Hackett as their offensive coordinator to team with Mike LaFleur, their new head coach. Now, the Miami Dolphins were planning to have Hackett be their quarterback coach this year, but he opted for the offensive coordinator job in Arizona instead. He goes back to being an offensive coordinator, a job he's held before, most recently with the New York Jets from 2023 to 2024. And the Pittsburgh Steelers have named Brian Angelico their offensive coordinator. They're finalizing that deal. He obviously comes over for the Minnesota Vikings, as Jeremy Fowler reported, and he goes back with Mike McCarthy from Green Bay. He used to coach at Pitt, so he's on comfortable, familiar ground back in Pittsburgh for the new offensive coordinator of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Frank Reich also returns to the Jets, where he once played with Aaron Glenn. This time he's the offensive coordinator for Aaron Glenn. He was most recently the interim head coach of Stanford, not far from here in San Francisco. He was the Panthers head coach, the Colts head coach, and now he has the enormous task of taking over the New York Jets offense, a team under fire, lots of offensive question marks. We don't know who his quarterback's going to be, but we know who the offensive coordinator for the Jets will be, Frank Reich.
We're going to get to the quarterback in a second, but just as it relates to how challenging this may be for Frank Reich, the Jets have gone 8 straight seasons with a team QBR ranking 26 or worse in the NFL. The last time the team ranked even better than just 20th in QBR was back in 2015 when their primary QB was Ryan Fitzpatrick. The team finished last season with undrafted rookie Brady Cook at quarterback after free agent signing Justin Fields did not work out. And Dan, Adam just asked the obvious question, who's going to be the quarterback for Aaron Glenn's Jets, and now Frank Reich is the OC. How do you see this shaking out?
Yeah, to be determined on that. When you look at Frank Reich, the style of quarterback that at least he's been best with, timing, mechanics, rhythm, great feet. And so that's the style of quarterback that I would imagine Frank Reich would want. Right now, I don't think that person's on the New York Jets. We'll see a Jacoby Brissett as an NFL free agent. If you look into the college ranks, Ty Simpson from Alabama certainly has those qualifications. I would say Garrett Nussmeier from LSU, who just came off of having a really good Senior Bowl. If you're the New York Jets, I wouldn't be surprised if you're adding somebody in the draft. I don't expect it to be a high draft pick unless they fall in love with somebody. But those would be 2 quarterbacks that at some point I think the Jets will have interest in.
And keep in mind, they have all these extra first-round draft picks coming. You could take a swing at a quarterback here and still come back and get another quarterback in a later draft in 27. The draft in 27 is supposed to be the one that's loaded with quarterbacks. Of course, we thought the draft this year would be loaded with quarterbacks.
Sure. Arch Manning, though,
you never
maybe.
know. But next year, there'll be a lot of quarterbacks. The Jets are armed with first-round draft picks. I think you're looking for somebody to see if you could develop them, build them, and if it works, great. And if it doesn't, you're right back to the drawing board.
I do think a young quarterback makes sense, but what happened, we didn't talk about it a ton. The Jets blew up basically their whole coaching staff in the last week, right? Just tons of people losing their jobs. I think how all the parts come together under Frank Reich will have another determining factor on, is this the right place for a young quarterback to be selected and developed?
It doesn't feel like there's a coaching staff under more pressure right now than the Jets coaching.
Well, and it felt to me like this hire from Aaron Glenn was maybe the most important one. So he goes with Frank Reich, someone who has the head coaching experience. All right, let's switch gears a little bit here to some of the head coaching hires that have been made in this cycle, which could come to an end after the Super Bowl with Clint Kubiak heading to Vegas. In total, 10 teams changed head coaches this offseason, and only one of those spots went to a minority coach, Robert Saleh, who was of Lebanese descent, to the Titans. It's the 5th time since the Rooney Rule was implemented in 2023 that no black head coaches were hired during an off-season cycle. RC and Marcus, this week, Roger Goodell made it clear that this has to change. He said there needs to be more diversity in coaching, and the league would be reevaluating everything they're doing. But RC, how big of an issue is this?
Well, I think it's a big issue, and we got to get off of the race or racism conversation and get into the nepotism and relationship conversation, because that's what this is about. The Rooney Rule started at the finish line when we got to get coaches a head start in the starting blocks. Look at the 2013 coaching staff in Washington. It had McVay, it had Shanahan, it had McDaniel, it also had LaFleur and Raheem Morris. And as 2 of them move on to be head coaches, they hire those 3 guys as coordinators. And then you look at a guy like Clint Kubiak, who moves in Minnesota after Gary Kubiak, his father, moves on. You look at Mike LaFleur, he coached with Robert Saleh in New York because he had a relationship with Kyle Shanahan. And you don't get this a lot for the 3 black coaches that you see on the defensive side of the ball. DeMeco Ryans hired by a team that drafted him. Aaron Glenn hired by a team that he played for. Todd Bowles got his job because of a 30-year relationship with Bruce Arians. The only coach who I think has understood this was Tony Dungy. You had Jim Caldwell, you had Mike Tomlin, you had Herm Edwards, and you had Lovie Smith. This isn't about racism in football, but the history of this country does play a part in it. You couldn't get generational wealth to own the team. And they didn't get black coaches in this league where they could select those players and understand the leadership qualities and the people that they see.
I think when we have this conversation, we always talk about the root cause, right? I mean, we always talk about the surface level. We never get to the root. And RC, you made a great point. It's an incubation process. It's all. If you look at all of those coaches, all of them are relatively associated with each other as well, even the ones that got hired at different teams. So when these calls go out and owners and general managers are calling about resumes and what do you think about this guy, you're going to say the names that you know. And right, it's like we all going into this coaching cycle pretty much knew who all was going to get hired. So for me, it's about grassroots. It's about making sure that through this pipeline of the NFL, you have more African-American coaches coming up to be offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators. That's what they hire from when you look at the situation in totality. mentality. So I love that you said it's not about racism, but it is nepotism.
Yeah.
It is a relationship-based business. And when you look at the coaching hire in this cycle, there is nothing pointing to that more than all of these guys either working with each other, for each other, or having relationships.
And the other side of that is so many coaches are offensive coordinators, right? You think about the backup quarterbacks that become offensive coordinators. That's not a position normally held by black players. And then starting at a quality control and moving up, you have to have a level of relationship with somebody, which they don't at all times. And so this is going to be about identifying leadership qualities, not the ones that are familiar to you, not the ones that are common to you, and now incubating those qualities and developing coaches that can move into head coaching positions in the future.
An incredibly important conversation, and so well said by both of you. Thanks for sharing your perspective for sure. Adam, what more can you add on this?
Well, listen, I think it's very discouraging when there are this many openings and you can't find a way to find one black head coach. And if we're talking about relationships, you think about Raheem Morris, who was hired as the defensive coordinator of the 49ers. When he was the Rams defensive coordinator, they pushed so hard for him to get one of those jobs. He had the Sean McVay pixie dust on him. The Atlanta Falcons hired him. They pushed for him. And sometimes it is about the relationships, but right now there don't seem to be enough minorities in the pipeline to somehow fill these jobs, which is disappointing.
You mentioned how many jobs were available. 10 head coaching openings this offseason. We're tied for the most in a single offseason all time. We'll keep an eye on how this continues to develop. We've distance, but I typed it in. If you tried to go right now, it'd take you about 2 hours. Get 35. Well, we're going to factor that in. But that's where we find Jeff Darlington. He's in Santa Clara covering the Seahawks all week long. And, Jeff, you had a chance to talk to Sam Darnold earlier today. What did you learn?
Well, we learned a lot about mind and body when it comes to Sam Darnold. By the way, a little update here. Sam Darnold did just board the bus to go to practice, where he is expected to make some throws, but the coaching staff still wondering how much he'll do because of the oblique injury that has limited him in practice each of the last 2 games and again last week as well. Now, Darnold did say he is feeling better each day, but it is still something that he and the team are managing. Now, let's also talk about his mind, though. When it comes to turnovers, that has been a source of conversation this week. And I had a chance to ask Darnold how he has managed to limit some of those turnovers since week 11, when he had 4 in one game, until now when he hasn't had a single one in the last 3 games.
When it comes to third down, being able to, get through my progression, understand why we're calling the play, if I do get out and scramble and I can find someone open, great. If not, that's kind of the benefit of having a great defense. Is I've always felt like this year, especially the latter half of the season, like I always felt like I never really had to force anything, and that's a big key for me as a quarterback, and a kind of a security blanket almost. Like I can feel really confident in just moving on to the next play and letting our special teams and our defense go to work, understanding that we just got to protect the football at all costs, and being able to move on as a quarterback from there.
Darnold said he feels confident in his team, but I can tell you that his team and his coaches also feel confident in him. They talked about his resiliency. When he did have those mistakes earlier in the season, he would come to the sideline and not lament them whatsoever. He would be stoic in the face of that adversity, and Mike McDonald said he believes that that's the simplest answer here, is that he just continued to grind, continued to make the throws, continued to make smarter decisions, and ultimately now, as they head into the Super Bowl, they know they've got one more game when he has to do exactly that, guys.
Yeah, Jeff, Cooper Kupp told me that Sam Darnold's the most resilient person he's ever been around, and really he took a lot from the way that Darnold has bounced back multiple times. Just great stuff from you. All right, we continue on here as we see Sam Darnold arriving there. The Seahawks boarded the team buses a short while ago to head to practice. Interesting what Jeff was saying.
Ginger Cuz.
I can't stand it. Interesting what Jeff was saying about Darnold maybe making a few more throws today. They're still, of course, protecting that oblique. And in their first 14 games of the season, the Seahawks averaged 113 rush yards per game, ranking 22nd in the NFL. But the ground game has really gotten going as of late. Over their last 5 games, including the playoffs, they're averaging nearly 150 yards a game and a yard more per carry. And Kenneth Walker has run for 5 of the team's 9 touchdowns in those 5 games. He's gotten hot when it mattered most. RC, why has this Seattle run game been so effective?
Well, I think the first thing, it is vision explosiveness, and then it's also versatility. When you look at Kenneth Walker and his ascension, these have always been tools he possessed, but we're now starting to see them on display. This play is going to start left and front side, but watch his vision on the cutback, and then the second level blocks by the offensive line. You have a seal, and from the double, you get to the backer, and look at this explosion from Kenneth Walker III. These are plays that not all running backs can make. This was blocked up for 10, and it turned into 50. And now, this isn't a run, but I did want to show you how he's involved in the pass game. Look at Clint Kubiak identify man-to-man with the motion from number 1 to the backfield, the tight split by Cooper Kupp, and the subtle brush or rub route that gets him into this wheel route. And if this is a good throw by Sam Darnold, he walks into the end zone. And so I love the way that they've involved him in the perimeter pass game. And Marcus and I were talking about this yesterday. The offensive line was like, we just ain't gonna block nobody. We're gonna let everybody get there. We're actually gonna let Byron Young have contain, and we're just gonna outrun him. I think that Kenneth Walker has really started to find himself in the run game where he believes his eyes and he has the athleticism and explosiveness to get where he needs to go.
He's such a unique running back.
Yeah.
Next Gen Stats put out this great stat, the most time behind the line of scrimmage, and Kenneth Walker, most of the season of any running back.
Worst, right?
Second most, longest, of
yes.
the Next Gen Stats era. Behind Jerome Ford. And some of that is, I think, the style. It's the outside zone, so you're taking longer tracks. But a lot of it is what RC alluded to, the patience and vision to allow the blocks to set up for him. I think the Seattle run game and the emergence of it over the second half of the season is so important in this game. Yep. Yesterday, we talked about whether or not New England should play base defense and how Seattle's been shredding it through the air. Through the first half of the season, when Seattle ran the ball on nickel and dime, they were 31st in success rate. Terrible. Second half of the season, 4th best in the league. So that allows you to punish defenses based on which personnel groupings they trot out, whether they overplay the pass, and it's made them more balanced as a result. In a way, to go back to Sam Darnold, the turnovers, that protects him.
Yeah. All right, so from my offensive perspective, when I see that Walker has been the most behind the line of scrimmage time-wise. So these slow developing runs, these gap scheme runs where we're pulling guy from one side, back starts, winds back the other way, or making guys miss. Like, from a defense, if we know it, Mike Vrabel and staff know it. So from just the defensive perspective, how do you guys defend that differently? Because I would be very cautious I think of Buffalo's run game, and it's like, now, I'm going to get 3. We're good. So from a deep offensive perspective, I think there's a little bit of like a dice roll. I know that this play can get blown up, but I also know that we can go for 8 to 12.
Yeah, one, they stretch in technique. That's what we use as a defensive line in the front. You stretch in technique, so you're forcing guys to be disciplined longer in the run. They almost run plays, RC, you're going to laugh at this, because it was hell when you played against it. They almost run their plays schematically like Le'Veon Bell runs to football. Right? Like he forces you to
scheme-wise
to
style,
right? And I remember you, in your mind, it's like, we're going to get TFLs all day. Yeah. And then you realize one gap missing. Yeah. That's the gap he finds, and they distorted, and now you go. You look at the clips that RC just shown. You got 4 guys in the backfield. But because there's no sense of contain, because of Kenneth Walker's patience, he's not trying to ram in. He's going outside and popping outside. There's a lot of things to be gained by sometimes a long developing play. But to your point, Dio, people get nervous about it sometimes because it will result in some TFLs. But as a defense, it forces you to stay disciplined for a long time during the down, as opposed to being able to be aggressively playing on the next level.
It's so crazy because I know you guys can't read this. It says schematically and intuitively.
I thought that said Dell Worthy Truly.
No, it says schematically and intuitively, because when I was listening to Mina, I immediately thought about Le'Veon Bell. Yeah. But schematically, the slow developing plays of the Seattle Seahawks are implemented. Le'Veon just ran away. Yeah. But the difference is this, though. Kenneth Walker's a 4.38 guy. Le'Veon Bell was 4.6. When Le'Veon Bell created that space or created his opportunities to get up the field, he couldn't hit the home run. Kenneth Walker can. And I think that's the difference. It's not that these plays are stretched wide. It's that he takes his time in his depth in his alignment, and then when he gets the football, he doesn't try to hit the hole right now. He wants to be able to hit it in a way where he can create chunk plays. And I think sometimes you create tackles for loss and you get some plays that are negative, but then you see the dividends paid on the other
It also
end.
feels like with Seattle, the longer the run play takes, the better blocking advantage they get because their skill players are really good at blocking.
Correct, on the perimeter.
Yeah. So Bill Callahan was the offensive line coach a few years. I was in Dallas. And we think of the offensive line as these road grading. No, there's a body positioning situation where backs are taught to read. And a lot of times as a defensive player, you can't be right. You're just counting on somebody coming from the backside and making the play just from body positioning. So it's a difficult scheme to stop. Bro.
See, that's why for Seattle and Kubiak, I think it'll just be interesting to watch. One, how much they trust Bradford blocking Milton one-on-one in those, whether Bradford's a puller.
It's the key matchup of the game to
or
me.
the pinner,
That's
right?
where this can be won or lost.
Milton Williams can kill those long developing plays. And then we've talked about it on the show, it hasn't necessarily been who New England is, but with all these Seattle cut splits and these receivers closer to the tackles and tight ends, do they pressure with those?
I would.
Corner
The
players?
Rams got him a few times with the DBs on
I
the
will say this, though. This is going to be a big game for Woodson and Hawkins.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? The eighth man coming into the box. They've made some really nice plays in the run game, being the unblocked hitter. That's going to be important.
And, buddy, you missed this one.
Yeah.
But you got to shoot, right?
Good luck,
you got to go.
They'll take it to the house. Patriots defense ranks 6th in rush yards allowed this season. So we know they can do it, but this scheme is different, as they so well illustrated. We've got more coming your way. Cowboys wideout George Pickens scored a touchdown. Look at this guy in last night's flag football game. But could it be the last time we see the free agent in Dallas gear? He was asked this week if he had given any thought to being franchise tagged by owner Jerry Jones this offseason.
I ain't even thought about that because it's been so much, kind of like you said, Micah's money and some of the space that he had. You see what I mean?
They basically said, we got money for you, so
you see what I mean?
Why are we talking about the franchise tag?
So I just wait on them. That's all I can really do. And chill with the guys.
You said getting one of your guys signed.
Yeah.
Which one are you talking about?
Yeah, the guy out here. The guy out here that doesn't have a contract, no matter in whichever way that they got to do it, he's an important piece of this offense, important piece of what we're trying to do. And so leave it to those guys. Obviously, if I need to get involved, I've said it before, I will. But confident in Jerry and everybody who makes those decisions and how much he means to us.
Shout out to DLLS Cowboys. They're doing the great work for us, getting on NFL Live. It was good stuff right there.
You know, the first thing that I think of when I see that is we saw Joe Burrow at the Super Bowl last year stumping for T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, and they both got paid.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing Dak Prescott stump for George Pickens. Saying we want him back. He's an important part of the offense.
Is it going to work?
The statement of if I have to get involved,
I will, and I've said it before, right?
Restructure his contract.
Adam, what are the Cowboys' plans for Pickens that you
Listen,
know?
I think they have the franchise tag at their disposal. They can talk to him at some point in time. George Pickens indicated that they haven't had any meaningful or substantial talks at all. But the Cowboys know they have the tag that they can use on him and then speak with him about a deal throughout the offseason. Look, clearly Dak Prescott wants him back. Clearly some of his teammates want him back. And clearly we saw the impact that he can have on the Cowboys offense. He's an important figure for them. I think Dallas would like to keep him, but I think they use that tag as a placeholder to try to get that deal done and have months to do it.
Dallas Cowboys take their time to get a deal.
I know.
What? Never happened.
It's shocking. I know.
I have such mixed feelings about this, and I want to hear your thoughts, obviously. Tagging makes sense, no doubt, but in terms of a long-term contract, financially, they can make it work. Actually, Dak would be a part of that because they'd restructure him, restructure CD, move on from, like, Kenny Clark. You can make it work. But we just had this conversation. You brought about Joe Burrow last offseason about the Bengals, and then we watched what happened to the Bengals defense. There are so many needs on this Cowboys defense right now. Pickens was amazing last year, and if you bring him back, that's once again going to be a top 10 offense at minimum. But I don't know how they fix that defense, Marcus.
It depends on how you want to play football. I wanted to ask Shefty a question because you bring up a great point, Mina. Where is Quinnen Williams on his contract?
He's got time left on his contract, and one of the more appealing elements of trading for him was trading for him on the deal that he had in place. Now, at some point they could revisit it, but I would not figure that to be a priority when you have other priorities that you have to address first.
So MK, I believe, one, you have to determine strategically how you want to win football games. And seemingly right now, they're closer to being dominant offensively right throughout the game. So now you need competency. You need linebackers You're going to have to hit in the draft. You don't have your secondary has been compromised as well. And I know that's asking a lot, but we've sat on the show a lot and talked about how these GMs have had a tremendous amount of success through the draft or bringing in free agents that play at a higher level. So that's really what it's going to have to be if you want to keep George Pickens, because George Pickens is going to want to be paid like a number 1 wide receiver.
Well, y'all know what's interesting? George Pickens and Micah Parsons have the same agent.
Yeah.
After what happened with Micah,
does the Bengals
So
scare
does Dak
you, though?
Prescott and George Pickens.
Exactly.
The Bengals would scare me if I had to sacrifice a Quinnen or a Odigizua, like your cornerstone guys.
No.
It's more about the
Bengals
the other
sacrificed
needs.
Trey Hendrickson in order to sign both receivers.
Well, but they got Trey Hendrickson done. They kept him there for a year.
Shefty.
Problem is all the other issues on the team, but the same as applies to Dallas, is what I'm saying.
But they were
Linebacker,
they were
edge,
holes.
safety,
They
nickel.
were holes regardless of if you signed Trey Hendrickson or not. And that's why the draft and hitting on free agency with lower tier payment guys that can play at a high level.
The Cowboys currently $66.8 million over projected salary cap.
So if you can't stop people, MK, you got to score 40.
That's what they said about the Bengals.
We got more coming your way here on NFL Live when we come back. Stephon Diggs has been a regular season star, but his playoff production has hit a wall. Can he find his spark in time for a Patriots Super Bowl win? Someone here thinks so. We'll tell you why. NFL Live is presented by Tostitos, the official chip and dip sponsor of the NFL. Golden Gate Drive, absolutely gorgeous. Sparkling day here in San Francisco, and we've got more coming your way from our set. We'll be right back.
It's so pretty.
It's pretty.